Hello, everybody. Hope you had a scaling week, and we are here again to continue our chat with Jeff. A quick recap in terms of what we covered over the past couple of episodes. Considering the fact that we've reached the third part of this four-part podcast series on scaling smart. So, before we dive in, a quick recap of where we've been. So in episode 1, we explored what happens after partner enablement and why so many programs stall there. We also talked about the systems, metrics, and internal alignment needed to truly scale a partner practice. In episode 2, we went beyond MDF, from SPIFs and accelerators to maturity-based incentives. We explored what actually drives partner engagement and how to measure and course correct quickly. Now, let's keep building. Episode 3 is all about making co-selling repeatable, not just hopeful. So let's jump straight into it. Jeff, thank you once again for making yourself available and joining us on this podcast today.
Oh, for you, Sandy, anything, anytime, man. I'm here for you.
Thank you very much. All right. So most co-selling efforts break down because they lack repeatable frameworks. So this episode looks at what it really takes to build and operationalize joint co-selling, from alignment with field teams to using tools that drive accountability and pipeline velocity. My first question for Jeff: why do co-selling motions often break down when trying to scale?
Oh, that's a really good question. And what I've seen time and time again is it can always be traced back to a trust erosion. The two parties have to be able to rely on each other, and they have to have that trust. And if that's not there, either because lack of expertise or sometimes there's channel conflict. There may be, I've seen cases where companies would have partners working on a deal, and unbeknownst to the partner and the partner seller, there's an inside sales rep that is also working a deal with that company. And that can cause huge trust erosion. The other thing I would say is, one side that's putting in more effort than the other side is. So, and I've seen this as well with numerous companies that the vendor looks and says, what good is the partner? They're not really bringing in any value to this. We're lining up all the subject matter experts. We're helping get this over the line. They haven't really brought anything to the table. Then you turn around and partners sometimes will say, we're doing all the heavy lifting here. We're not getting credit for this deal. So like I said, that it gets to that one side thinking that they're putting in more effort than they're supposed to, or certainly than the other side is. The other area, probably the biggest, is going to be attribution. How is the deal attributed to its source? And that comes down to people getting paid. So that tends to be an area where there's some breakdown when you try and scale your co-selling.
Sure. Do you reckon it's important that both the partners as well as the folks that are actually running the deal are discussing deals up ahead in advance, talking about what their strategies are going to be, how do they tackle them, how do they go across that entire pipeline while they're evaluating these deals together, and align on who's doing what, and also ensure there's transparency in the entire process?
Absolutely. I mean, you kind of think of the partner sales organization should be a natural extension of your own. And you're doing those kinds of things already with your own organization. You're talking about what's in the pipeline. You're talking about the deals from a very early stage, from opportunities when they're just opportunities. What does that look like? What do we need to move this forward to a deal? Who needs to be involved? What kind of expertise do we need to demonstrate? All of that stuff happens with your inside sales organization. It needs to happen with your partner sales organization as well. So 100%, there needs to be that level of transparency and engagement.
Consider them as an extension of your own team.
Right. Exactly.
Sure.
And, and that comes down to doing QBRs even,
Yeah.
right? I mean, doing quarterly business reviews. Now,
Yeah.
maybe you don't, come in with the same, poking and prodding that you may with your own sales team. You do it a little bit more tactfully
Yeah.
because it's not your own sales team and you don't want to alienate them. But certainly doing that quarterly check, how are we doing and how are we tracking?
Sure. What are the pillars of a successful and repeatable joint sales motion that you would say?
Well, first and foremost, number one pillar is going to be that customer, having that ideal customer profile, having it well defined, and it can be a slight variant from the ICP that your company has as a vendor. It aligns with because now you're teaming with another organization, and it needs to be fine tuned to that relationship and that specific offering. So having that customer focus, having that defined ICP is very much the first step. The second thing is alignment on how you're going to engage with those prospects. So that comes down to understanding you're an expert here or I'm an expert there. Let's make sure we're coordinating. Who has the relationships so we're not stepping on each other's toes. There needs to be alignment on how you're going to do that, and then the steps that you're going to take. Doing those initial meetings, doing that, trying to understand what are the challenges that they're facing, or what it is they're trying to solve for, what's the outcome they're looking for, and then working together to assess how we can put a solution together, and then selling it. I mean, you need to have that alignment all the way through the sales process. The third thing I would say, it's kind of like what I mentioned previously, that there must be mutual resource engagement. So one side's not feeling like they're putting in more effort than the other. So understanding how the resources need to be deployed. And then last but not least, it's going to be in that closing. How are we going to close this? And be very clear on that situation. So those would be the pillars I would address first and foremost.
Sure. You paid a lot of emphasis talking about alignment. How do you align direct sellers with partner sellers in the field?
Well, it's going to start with the basic foundation for sales. I used to work with a CRO years ago who would always gleefully talk how his sales force was coin operated. And I believe that to be 100% true. I mean, we're all coin operated to a certain degree, but sellers, that's their thing. They live for the deal. They live for those closes. And so making sure that everyone gets comped is going to be the very first way to make sure you can get alignment in the field. All too often, I've seen inside sellers or vendor sellers, let's say, unwilling to bring a partner into the deal because they're afraid they're not going to get the commission, that the partner will get it. And so internally, they get that attribution goes away from them. So they get concerned about bringing a partner in. The other reason that they don't want to bring a partner in sometimes is because they think it's going to slow the deal down. So that's going to have to come into ensuring expertise on both sides. Your company is probably doing a lot as a vendor to enable and train your sales force. You need to be able to do the same for partners. And it's not just about the technical enablement. Certainly do that. And that tends to be the model that people follow. But the sales enablement and building out a practice, that's an area that you really need to focus in on to make sure that you've got experienced and expert sellers in the partner side. So having that in place drives mutual respect between the vendor sellers and the partner sellers. And then the third thing I would say is it's going to be clean guidelines on who owns what. Making sure that you've got the contact, you're going to be doing this, we have the technical expertise, we're going to bring in subject matter experts like this. However that conversation happens, you need to make sure that you've got those clean guidelines on who owns what.
Yeah, there's that age-old saying that goes, right? You're only as good as your team is, right? So I think it's a cohesive effort that needs to go in, And along with the alignment, there's some brilliant pointers that you're talking about here, which is definitely going to be gold to a lot of the listeners. Um, what tools, incentives, or training help make co-selling successful at scale, Jeff?
So, probably the most basic and one that most people are employing are the deal portals. And those are vital because, especially as you scale, having a good deal portal makes sure that you minimize channel conflicts. So the scenario I mentioned earlier, that a partner is working a deal, that you don't have one of your own sellers working that deal, and now you're competing against each other and you're competing against your partner. So having those deal portals in place, and having that tied to the CRM system and making sure that that's active and up to date, that's probably one of the best tools out there. The other thing that I always put into the programs that I develop for companies is around go-to-market alignment. So, as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, it's not about just enabling them around the technology, but it's also enabling them around how to sell, who to sell to, how to sell it, the value that the offering brings, and helping them understand the value of the offering plus the value of their services, their offering, what that looks like together, and helping to build out a go-to-market strategy and plan around that, where now you're addressing customer, you're addressing that joint solution of product and services, you're addressing marketing, how you're going to get that messaging, what kind of messaging you're going to create, and how you're going to get it out there and where. And then that sales motion, being able to align on that. So hitting that go-to-market strategy and addressing those 4 core pillars of go-to-market, that's probably one of the best ways to ensure you're co-selling today and as you scale. Because as you start to scale, you have many more partners who are out there with many more messages, many more approaches. So the more you can get them aligned to your go-to-market strategy, the better that's going to be.
You always pay a lot of emphasis on the go-to-market strategy, and I feel like that should be the Bible for, all for everything that happens selling. And I see why it's so important, right? Because unless you're aligned, unless you're prepared, I mean, let's talk about a game, right? Anybody that's going into a game does a lot of strategy, does a lot of planning before they enter the game, because only if they do that do they know what the strengths and weaknesses are. Only then do they know how you're working towards each other. And especially when you're going in with a partner, you got to repel off each other, right? So what they're good at, you kind of take a back seat. What you're good at, you take the front seat, and then you play that tag team effort.
Right. Absolutely. And, I do come back to go to market quite a bit because it's the foundation that drives the success.
Yeah.
And, it lines up with who are we going after? How are we going to talk to them? What's important to them? And being able to understand who that customer is, more so than just, oh, we're going after executives in banking and financial services at large enterprises. Digging deeper. What are some of their pains, wants, aspirations, and needs? And being able to understand that is going to help drive messaging, going to help drive the way you engage with that prospect and the success rate you're going to have to turn them into a customer. So yeah, absolutely. I believe go-to-market's the foundation for partner success.
Sure. What does a co-sell playbook look like, and who owns it?
Well, a co-sell playbook is going to have to be something that, again, going back to go-to-market, it's based on a specific play, going after a specific audience, understanding for a broad strokes organization. Let's say that banking, and it's a mortgage, VP of mortgage that you're going after, or a mortgage app that you're looking to promote. Being able to understand who that's going after and what's critical for that person, and then aligning all the activities that you're doing, from the content that you're creating, from emails, collateral, presentations, all of that, to where you're going to deliver that, whether that's in person, whether that's digital marketing, whether that's at a trade show, whether that's at an association event, or if you're blogging. Aligning all of that content under that same framework then is going to help set up sales success. So that playbook needs to address that full motion of what it is that you're doing. Now, in terms of who owns it, there's a number of places, and I think everybody owns a piece of it. But as far as championing it or ushering it through the process, that's probably going to be a product marketing organization, partner marketing organization that's going to have that, because they're the ones who are going to be working with the various groups and pulling together the content. They're working with sales to make sure that it's stuff that sales believes in. You can't come and just create something and then go hand it to sales. That doesn't work very often. I've seen way too many times where sales organizations sit in the sales kickoff and they're hearing messaging for the first time and they're like, yeah, cool, whatever. What did I do? Because it works. So understanding what works. So it's getting to the sales teams. They need to have active participation in it. And then by all means, you have to be including partners as you develop it. Again, it's just like your internal sales team. If you create something without their input, it's a crapshoot. You got to make sure that you absolutely hit the mark 100%, and you're not going unless you get their input. So sales partners need to be involved. But as far as owning it and making sure it gets delivered, that's probably going to be partner marketing.
Interesting. Great. Thank you once again for all of your inputs. This session, again, was extremely valuable. I'm sure there's partner marketers taking a lot from some of these sessions. So that's actually a wrap on co-selling that actually scales. Again, thanks, Jeff, for all of your inputs on the real talk and no fluff. Just moves the work. Thank you, everybody, once again for listening in, and see you in the next episode. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks. And here's the last word. If your co-sell plan lives in a Google Doc that no one updates, you're not co-selling, you're crowd wishing. Co-selling doesn't scale on good intentions. Have questions on aligning field teams, building a co-sell playbook, or cleaning up attribution chaos? Email us at grow@buyerforesight.com or drop questions in the comments. Let's talk real motions that drive real deals. Hit us up. We want to hear your war stories and wins.